Brothers, sisters, let's talk about a few things. Now, a lot of spiritual or religious systems, or systems that are not spiritual or religious, um, there is a fine line between true spiritual knowledge and insanity. And this line exists really in the human being. Now, let me relate to you a small story about a guru. This guru who lived a long time ago was telling his disciple through the description of a plant how his spiritual path was very uh, kind of on the border of you know positivity and negativity, kind of like how all of our spiritual paths are. And he said, "This plant, this little plant, if it gets too much water, if it has too much light, or if it doesn't have enough soil for its roots to dig into, any of these key factors, just a little bit too much or a little too little or a little too small amount of any of these one factors would basically break the life cycle of this plant. Poor little plant. Now, in order for a plant to flourish, just like our spiritual paths, it has to have just the right amount of everything, not too much and not too little. Um, the human being himself is very is very much like this plant. Our spiritual path is always a balance. Now there are many paths to God, of course, but for us to actually move forward along any path, everything has to be just right. And if we kind of go off of the path, that doesn't mean that we fall back down to the beginning of the path. It just means that we do not progress. And sometimes these speed bumps in our spiritual paths are are seemingly minor, and we might not even know we're not progressing. We might not even know that we we are stepping back upon our path or not going along the one that we have chosen. To be a human being is to have extreme freedom, but in that freedom there is an element of danger. This element of danger is reliant upon us knowing what we have to do along the path. And this is why it's very important to have a guru for most people. I mean, I wish I had the good fortune to have a guru because I do not have one. But a guru, of course, means a dispeller of darkness. Um, Gu being darkness and Ru being dispeller. To have somebody who has progressed along the path further than you, teaching you how to move forward, make sure that you don't get caught up in a bush, to use another example in the analogy, or to make sure that you're not walking backwards thinking that you're walking forwards, that you're not regressing. Regressio ad infinitum, infinite regression back to the cause. Now, if we regress enough, sometimes we can say we can also find God, because we have to think of finding God as kind of a circle, not necessarily a straight line as far as a path goes. Sometimes if we go far enough back along our path, we find the roots, and then we're like, oh, okay, I wasn't moving forward, I was moving back, but now that I understand the roots of my path, I can move forward again, and I have to redo a lot of it, but at least I'm moving forward. And this has to do with understandings of things like the ego, pride, or believing that you're superior to others in regards to your knowledge. And all these things are very much related, but these things can go so far as to make us believe we're actually progressing, we're actually gaining more knowledge, when in truth we actually are not. We are actually inflating our ego and surrounding it with this wall that cuts it off from true spiritual experience and true knowledge. And when that happens, we become incredibly isolated uh, from reality, from our understanding of both where we're going and where we've been, to the point where we're basically in delusion to the extent that we think we're progressing, but really we're just walking around in circles in our ego, confined by these walls that we built up through pride, fears, and desires as well. Kind of aid pride and ego. They're the kind of thing that the ego uses in order to create a home for itself in our own psyche. And our psyche is just as temperamental and walking that fine line as a plant as far as the elements that it needs in order to survive. So let me relate another story. Uh, Now, in Kriya Yoga and in many of the yogas, we find that if you aren't properly initiated, if you haven't properly prepared for your progression in that yoga, Kriya Yoga especially, and of course, there are elements in other yogas, the Raja, Bhakti, Jnana. Jnana Yoga is actually very hard because it's not about just knowing things; it's about experiencing all that knowledge for you to truly know it. But anyway, in Kriya Yoga, if you practice Kriya Yoga and do all these techniques and you do them a little bit incorrectly, you haven't been properly initiated. That's when you can actually cause damage to your nervous system. And let me go ahead and show you all the chat just in case. There we go. And this is my first live stream that I've told people about, by the way, but I didn't give very much warning. So this is the first one I've told anybody about. And the very first one before I didn't tell anybody was last night. But I'm trying to really make my channel grow and allow it to grow organically to where I don't use some of the tactics that other people use, because if I use those same tactics of clickbaiting or just talking about what's popular in society, then I wouldn't get anywhere. But going back to what I was talking about, I will address the comments in a sec. Going back to what I was talking about, there was this guru in this audiobook that I was listening to was talking about how this one man advanced in Kriya Yoga to a very high degree. He was very advanced in Kriya Yoga, but just when he was, before his next phase, before he conquered his next chakra, he wasn't properly initiated, so he didn't know how to move on from this chakra. So he actually damaged his nervous system, and he would randomly see spiritual experiences, like he'd randomly see the Divine Mother Kali Ma, maybe. I remember the word Divine Mother, but not necessarily Kali Ma. And he would just run at her and try to get to her. And then he ended up running to a tree or a wall or something like that, and then just like either knocking himself out or hurting himself, and the experience would kind of end. If we don't properly train our emotions, our nervous system, our psyche, and don't follow correct understanding, then we can damage ourselves through certain spiritual paths. It doesn't mean that these paths are inherently bad. It just means that it's walking a fine line, and you have to be prepared. You have to prepare yourself. You have to find a teacher that can prepare you, or at the very least, like me, you have to accept a certain degree of danger along your spiritual path, because I don't have a guru, so I accept a certain degree of danger. Now, well, I'll address one comment. I became a Hindu when I finally found Hinduism after researching every religion and went through many different spiritual paths. And then I started going to church for a while and studying the Bible, and the answers just weren't there. The answers that the preachers would tell me did not have any true experiential knowledge. What do I mean by experiential? I mean that they knew things from books. They would tell me things from books, which even those answers weren't satisfying. But I didn't sense that they actually experienced their knowledge. They just kind of regurgitated it at me. And when people regurgitate knowledge at me, it's very clear. I mean, I don't know if this is just me, but I can tell all the time when somebody's just blurting out what they read and they don't really understand it. To be a true guru or somebody who can teach somebody spiritually, you have to have some kind of experiential spiritual knowledge. And eventually my path led me to Hinduism, because it really has a plethora of exactly how to do things in many different spiritual paths. And Hinduism was wonderful and is wonderful because, like, there's no one book you have to follow the doctrine of in order to be Hindu. It's just an exchange about consciousness and truth, a culture of exchange about consciousness and truth. And most of the Hindus that I know and myself don't believe in the caste system, but I've talked about that in past videos. And the caste system was basically instituted in the way it is by the British during the occupation, so they mutated it into something terrible. But regardless, I found Hinduism over many years of searching for truth, and the knowledge about God that I found today, I feel very solid and along my path. And yeah, and a lot of people have been asking me to talk about the Bhagavad Gita. And I've read most of the Bhagavad Gita. I've listened to the audiobooks of the Bhagavad Gita several times, and I love it. The reason I haven't focused on it, the reason I haven't really made videos about it is because my feedback on the Bhagavad Gita was not nearly as important as books like The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita by Paramahansa Yogananda, as remembered by Swami Kriyananda. Books like that is an appropriate commentary. As far as my commentary, I'm really hesitant to give my own commentary. And if I was to talk about the Bhagavad Gita, it'd be commenting on somebody else's commentary, like Paramahansa Yogananda, because I don't feel that I have the proper understanding to truly explain the Bhagavad Gita and its passages. But I will try in the near future because I've had a lot of people asking me that. Yes. Hindus, a lot of Hindus that I've met, and myself included, do love Jesus, do recognize that he was an avatar. Some say Shiva, his avatar Shiv. Some say his avatar Vishnu. I'm not sure about that, about which, form of God he's an avatar of. So a lot of people say Shiv doesn't have any avatars. But anyway, yeah, I never understand why other religions think that, you can't value Krishna and Jesus Christ or Shakyamuni Buddha. They can all have a piece of pure and divine consciousness, God breaking up infinite pieces of himself to come down and be wrapped in these human bodies in order to guide us. And many Hindus that I know do respect and love Jesus, including myself, and I've never stopped loving Jesus. It was never about Jesus. That's not why. It's never, my leaving the path of Christianity was not about me not loving Jesus anymore. It was about it was about not having completion in Christianity, not completion in Jesus. So insanity is very reliant upon the path I was talking about earlier, as far as going down a very narrow path. And no matter what path you follow, there's many paths, but going down it completely straight. And if you're dealing with systems of yoga or systems of magic that if not used properly, can actually influence your nervous system in a negative way. Of course, the positive way is apparent when people describe it who have obviously reached a higher state. But there's also this danger of using magic or yoga incorrectly, and basically destroying your progress and damaging your nervous system, sometimes permanently. But I don't want to say permanently most of the time, but there's a danger in it. And if your nervous system is damaged just a little bit, even if it's just in your brain and not necessarily along your spine, which they're of course connected, but then you will have psychological issues. You might actually fall into schizophrenia. Now, schizophrenia is genetic, but I would say schizophrenic-like tendencies and psychosis, because I've experienced psychosis from schizophrenia, and my schizophrenia is genetic. But you can definitely, if you damage your nervous system by improperly using magic or yoga, you can seem like a schizophrenic, and you can definitely have all kinds of psychosis, hallucinations, sensing things on your skin that aren't there, very much like withdrawal from addiction. Or you might constantly hear voices. And, all of these things I've experienced, but this was when I was 15 to 18, 19, before I was properly medicated. By the way, that's a whole nother story as far as finding right medication and if medication is only the right way to go. But I've experienced insanity, and the spiritual experiences that I've had afterwards, after I got out of insanity, those experiences were so much more clear than psychotic experiences that I've had of hallucinations. My spiritual experiences they felt completely different. Now, I'm always open to the idea that I'm insane, but the spiritual experiences that I've had did not feel anything like the psychosis that I experienced, where I was seeing dead people walking around or hearing voices say my name over and over and over again. Things like that were just completely different. It kind of felt like my mind was open during spiritual experiences, and it was very isolated when there weren't spiritual experiences in my life, but psychosis. I am not married. That was another question. I'm trying to get to as many as I can. Let's see what we got here. No, yoga is not bad. Now, most people in the West, including myself, until I started really looking into yoga, think that yoga is all about hatha yoga, which is body yoga, which is the kind that we know. Hatha yoga is it's basically completely focused on not only immortality, but all yogas are kind of focused on immortality, but that's not the main goal. It's really, you just kind of achieve it by accident. And when I say immortality, I don't mean immortality of the body necessarily, but your energies can manifest in a way that they want, with a continuation from your spiritual path during your next rebirth. But Hatha yoga is very focused on aligning the energies of the body and not necessarily on ascending energy up the spine, right, raising kundalini, or through Kriya yoga, or even Jnana yoga, because Jnana yoga is knowledge yoga, but it is the experience of knowledge, not just book knowledge. So the different yogas, if used incorrectly, not all of them, some of them are the most dangerous form of yoga is Tantra. So if you use that incorrectly, it can actually increase your desire. It can actually increase the amount of fear and ego you have. And it's really easy to fall off the path as far as Tantra yoga goes. Now, when it comes to, okay, hold on one sec. Sorry. So meditation can be called Raja Yoga, but meditation is employed in all the different yogas. I mean, period. But specifically, meditation is Raja Yoga. This is a book by Swami Vivekananda that I would recommend. I haven't dug into it yet, but I've read other works by Swami Vivekananda that talk about different Raja Yoga techniques. And really, Raja Yoga is almost completely meditation, and it's not focusing necessarily on raising energy. It's about conquering your internal nature. In your brain, there is, of course, we talked about the ego and pride and desire and fear. In the brain, there are certain ideas that repeat themselves throughout our day, throughout our life. Certain ideas that we don't necessarily know we're thinking. They just kind of our backdrop, our canvas upon which we think, upon which we experience. And these ideas can be called assumptions or emotional responses. A lot of the time when somebody's very fearful, somebody's very filled with desire and very agitated because they're angry or stressed all the time, they can snap and metaphorically bite your head off. And then that shows kind of a imbalance of their assumptions and their practice. Now, to take apart your assumptions, you just have to take apart your ego. You have to stop assuming that you know everything, and that just because you read this or that text, that's the only truth and there's nothing else to learn. And then you just tell other people about it, and then you don't continue along your spiritual path. You'll eventually fall back because you're not continuing to take in information and trying to experience it, spiritual practices and spiritual knowledge. But back to Raja Yoga. Getting rid of the assumptions is a big part of Raja Yoga. And then being able to control your emotions, you'll find that happening naturally the more that you meditate. Being able to control your anger, your aggravation, your depression, your anxiety, the more you meditate, even if it's just meditation that you're basically sitting cross-legged. And this is one I do a lot. You have your hands like this, you have them on your knees, back straight, and you're really imagining a bubble expanding from the center of your brain, but not by seeing it, but by feeling it. And then imagine that bubble, just feel that bubble pushing out all the negative, all the thoughts, just no thoughts, no words, no images. Imagine this bubble just expanding from the center of your brain. And anytime, and then kind of hold it there. And anytime a thought comes or an image, just allow the bubble to push it out. But don't respond emotionally. Don't be like, oh, I just can't get all these thoughts out of my head. Just keep on going back to that bubble expanding, really feeling it. And then do that I start out with 5 minutes in a couple of weeks. If you do that every day, 10 minutes, and then so on and so forth, however you feel is the most, the best way for you to consider your path and go along it. But you'll find yourself naturally being able to control your emotions, depression, anxiety. The worst times of my life were times when I actually had to meditate. Otherwise, I would have gone insane. I don't meditate as much as I used to because I have other spiritual practices, and also I'm not in a bad place. But it's very important to, even if you're not in a bad place, and I'm not right now, it's very important to meditate regardless, because it'll actually it'll just skyrocket you along your conquering of yourself, of your mind, of your tendencies that you feel control you, whether they be sexual, whether they be fear oriented, or this drive to be ambitious and to conquer others. meditation, once you get rid of all those negative emotions, feelings, stuff like that, and you might not get rid of them completely, of course, but then that's when you go to the positive aspect, where you're not trying to get rid of negative stuff in you. You're actually going toward the positive, and that's a whole nother part of the journey. And it's not clear cut as far as like which one comes first, or you complete one then you go to the next. It's about this constant exchange between you and your path. Now, let me address a few more questions. I don't want to make this too long. Yeah, I believe that the Bhagavad Gita does give you, I mean, it can give you direction every time. I mean, so much of its teaching is relevant to every single human being. I mean, basically all of the teaching, of course. It's a conversation with God. It's Bhagavad Gita is a song of God. It's in the Mahabharata, which is the epic of man. And the Mahabharata itself has many lessons. I've read many, and then to answer another question, I've read many Hindu spiritual texts, and most of them I didn't read to the very last page, but I just try to consume as much information as possible. Now, let's see what else we got here. Now, I myself have experienced anxiety and depression quite a bit, and meditation helps me conquer that so much. Now, I do take medication, but be very careful. A lot of the oldest medications are the most reliable. I mean, oldest in psychiatry. The newer medications, I've tried a lot of them in the past, and they're the ones that are understudied. They're very new, very expensive, and don't have decades of analysis of information by doctors. Be very careful with the new ones. Now, I don't want to be an advocate for medication, but Doxepin, I think, is a very good medication. It's very old, since the 60s, 50s, and fights anxiety and depression and helps sleep. Very reliable medication that I found. But that doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. I'm just putting it out there. Let's see what else we got here. Well, Champagne C, you got a lot of good questions. I'm trying to see if we got any others around here. Well, on to another one. Yoga and meditation they're almost synonymous. Yoga basically means path. Meditation is a practice within paths. So there's different kinds of meditation based on what path you're following. Buddhist meditations are the best to start with, in my opinion. Now, of course, Buddhism has its roots in Hinduism, and I'm not Buddhist, I'm Hindu. But there's a lot of Buddhist meditations that I would highly recommend. And let me see if I got a book that I can recommend. Aha. Nope. All right. Well, I will share some meditation books in the future. I seem to have misplaced some of them. I got so many books right now. One book that I recommend on magic, if any of you ever want to get into magic, this is one that I haven't dug into a whole bunch, but looking through it, and I purchased it recently. Looking through it, it has a lot of good information, and it's the Grimoire for the Green Witch by Anne Mora. Yeah, Mora. There we go. And tomes like this that are, not necessarily positive or negative Wiccan, but I consider a lot of Wiccan works to be very, very positive, despite the superstitions about witches. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, I mean, I've met a lot of people that take medication, and it's a long road to find the right ones. But it's helped me with a lot of my insanity. But it's very important to have a spiritual practice like meditation or exchanges like pujas with the gods. And I have my own, shrines with my own spirits and gods. Of course, I developed a relationship with the Divine Mother Kali Ma, and she's basically my number one way in which I recognize the source or God. I worship the grander whole through the Divine Mother Kali Ma, and and I have this tapestry behind me. But images like that are why people think that Kali Ma is terrible. But the thing about Kali Ma you have to learn is that every single part of that image is symbolic. The trident or Trishula represents when you grasp it, a mastery of the three natures of reality. Tamas, Rajas, Sattva. Tamas is torpor, darkness. Rajas is activity, is desire, ambition, kind of back and forth between darkness and and Sattva, between Tamas and Sattva, because we're going back and forth based on, very emotional activity. And really it's about using Rajas to really desire spirituality. Then once you get to Sattva, acting correctly, um, uh, basically following virtue, having a clear mind, and working your way to a point where you go beyond duality. Sattva is basically purity. So we have tamas, rajas, sattva. And then that trishula also represents grasping the spine. The garland of heads she has is basically represents two things. The heads of demons, of thoughts in our mind that were holding us back, that we offered her, and she severs the head. And they all represent the different letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. And Shakti, the kind of the name that a lot of people call entities like the Divine Mother Kali Ma, though I do believe the Divine Mother Kali Ma is vaster. She represents Shakti, or energy, in this, and then standing on matter. So she represents the energy of this world. Shiv represents matter. And of course, there are a few other things that I could describe in that, but that's not what this video is about. But regardless, now, as far as finding the path that resonated with me, I followed my heart and my logic. Now, finding what your heart truly wants and what your logic truly is, these are things that are not easy. Become a practitioner along any path or in any tradition, you have to find what resonates with your soul. And now your logic and your heart are, I'm not necessarily speaking about the physical, but that too, but the subtler influences of your logic, your intellect, and your heart allow you a doorway to the soul. Now you kind of have to attune these two things in you to your soul, and then get a sense for where your path truly lies. It doesn't sound very clear because not everybody finds their path the same way, but I can say that when I found my path, it felt like I didn't have any fear anymore. Like I knew that I wasn't going to go to the hell that like Christians believe in. I knew that, I still believe in hell, but you don't go there forever. And it's for very bad things. And it's really just a brief, not necessarily brief, but a punishment period. Then you get another chance in reincarnation. But regardless, and it's very hard to go to hell. But I lost the fear that was basically in the dogma in Christianity and even in Buddhism. Hell seems very prominent in a lot of Buddhist scriptures and ideologies. But once you get past that fear and you really find your connection to God or the gods or spirits, however you want to understand the multiverse, once you get there, then you'll feel it. Now, I can't tell you how you'll feel it because it's like describing what an orange tastes like to somebody who's never tasted citrus or anything like an orange. You really just have to feel that really strong, ding on a bell within your being once you find the right path. And that's what I felt. Paramahansa Yogananda changed my life. Swami Kriyananda, look up, Self-Realization Fellowship. That's a organization associated with Paramahansa Yogananda. He's long gone, and Kriyananda is long gone. But Kriyananda has great books, Kriyan. Anyway, Kriyananda, just sound it out. You got it. But regardless, I would highly recommend SRF, Self-Realization Fellowship, and Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda. And these are the organization and one disciple and then one guru who have really changed my life. And I recommend them to everybody, but it might not be for you. You have to find what really hits home with you. And it wasn't necessarily about belief anymore. It was like I was convinced, and I couldn't just go against my heart and my intellect. They were at one in the path that I found, and I was convinced. How could I lie to myself any longer and go do something else? Now, through this path, I believe that there are many paths to God, basically, and there's no one religion that's just completely wrong. You can find God through many different paths, through many different spiritual traditions. It doesn't even have to be a religion. It can be like a spiritual tradition, or there's even a lot of atheist Hindus who work on their consciousness and work towards God. Sadhguru talks about how if you don't find a God that you like, just make up one and then work towards union with the divine and everything else through your understanding. And that's very difficult. I couldn't go into that, but Sadhguru has a lot of amazing videos. Now, before I go any further in this video, and I really thank all of you for watching. Hold on one sec. Okay. I thank all of you for watching, and I will be doing another live stream very soon. I will be informing you through a video on YouTube either hours before or even half a day or a day before. But it'll be very prominent on my channel, so feel free to subscribe, and I will let you know ahead of time because that seems to be the way to go. And I thank all of you for your questions. Everybody in the comment section, I appreciate your feedback, and I appreciate your questions. And I hope to see you on my channel in the future, commenting. I try to get to every comment on my videos, and really working towards a bigger community. Not necessarily centered around me on my channel, but really just ideas about spirituality. So that's really the goal that I'm working towards, and I hope you would work towards that with me. Now, if you want to donate any money to me, I only require $1 on my Patreon account, $1 a month. And Patreon is very good with account information. It's a very reliable system, so don't be worried about that. But on Patreon, it's only $1 a month, and you can of course donate more. And I'll use all this money towards making the channel better and doing spiritual things. But you get access to, once you become a patron, you get access to videos that I don't post on YouTube that are a little bit more personal, but also spiritual. And those videos will be available to you once you start paying that $1 a month. If you pay me more, that'd be awesome. And my Patreon account is www.patreon.com/darkrealist. Capital D, capital R, one word. Dark Realist is at the end, capital D, capital R. If you type in Dark Realist or Hunter Salazar on Patreon, you might find me through that as well. But feel free to donate to me. I would greatly appreciate it. Namaste. Thank you all.